Gold digger humiliates a janitor, unaware he was an undercover billionaire. Ethan Blake surveyed the grand ballroom of the Viridian Grand Hotel with a careful eye, noting every gilded surface and crystal chandelier. His hand gripped a simple mop, a far cry from the fountain pen he normally used to sign multi-million-dollar deals. The janitor's uniform hung loosely on his athletic frame, the name tag reading simply, Ed. No one would suspect that beneath the fraying blue coveralls was the 35-year-old billionaire co-founder of the hotel chain they were standing in. "Hey, new guy! The West Corner needs attention. Someone spilled champagne," called Miguel, the actual head of maintenance, unaware he was giving orders to the man who signed his paychecks. "On it," Ethan replied with a nod, pushing his cleaning cart toward the mess. 3 weeks into his undercover mission, and he still felt the thrill of anonymity. No fawning executives, no gold diggers vying for his attention, just honest work and unfiltered interactions. Tonight was the annual Luxury Brands Gala, where the elite of fashion, hospitality, and entertainment converged to network and flaunt their success. Ethan had purposely chosen this event for his evaluation. High stress, high expectations, the perfect testing ground for staff behavior. As he approached the spill, he noticed a woman commanding attention at the center of the room. Even among the city's elite, she stood out. Her midnight blue gown shimmered with each movement, dark hair cascading down her back in perfect waves. She laughed at something a balding executive said, touching his arm in a gesture that seemed both casual and calculated. "That's Vanessa Cruz," whispered Lucia, a waitress who had been kind to Ethan since his first day. "PR maven trying to land the director position here. Been flirting with every executive who might have a say in hiring." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Is she qualified? On paper? Absolutely. In person? Let's just say she's nice to people she thinks matter." Lucia hurried away with her tray of hors d'oeuvres, leaving Ethan intrigued. He continued mopping, moving closer to where Vanessa held court. She was speaking to James Parker, Viridian's regional vice president, a man who reported directly to Ethan but had never met him in person. "James, darling, the campaign I ran for the Monaco Grand increased their bookings by 40%. Her voice was honey smooth, confident. "Imagine what I could do for Viridian with a proper budget and team." "Your resume is certainly impressive," James replied, clearly charmed. "We're down to the final candidates, and I must say, you're making quite the impression. I hope the elusive Mr. Blake agrees with your assessment." She sipped her champagne. "Does he ever actually appear for these decisions, or is he too busy counting his billions?" James laughed nervously. "Ethan has his methods. He takes hiring for key positions very seriously, especially with how much personal investment he has in the brand's image." Ethan suppressed a smile as he worked on the champagne spill. If only they knew. As he finished and turned to move his cart, his elbow accidentally bumped a passing server, causing him to stumble slightly. He regained his balance quickly, but his mop handle swung around and lightly brushed against Vanessa's dress. The room seemed to freeze. "Excuse me," Ethan said immediately, his voice deliberately humble. "I'm very sorry about that." Vanessa's expression morphed from surprise to disgust in seconds. Her eyes narrowed as she examined her dress for any marks. "Do you have any idea how much this Versace costs?" she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. "Probably more than you make in a year." Ethan nodded apologetically. "I'm sure it is, ma'am. Again, I apologize." Instead of accepting his apology, Vanessa seemed to grow more indignant, perhaps emboldened by the audience she'd attracted. "This is exactly what's wrong with service these days. You hire anyone off the street and expect them to work around luxury they can't even comprehend." James stepped forward. "Ms. Cruz, I'm sure it was just an accident. Is this the standard of the Viridian Grand? Clumsy janitors bumping into guests at exclusive events?" She looked Ethan up and down with undisguised contempt. "Shouldn't he be emptying trash somewhere out of sight?" A few uncomfortable titters rose from the gathering crowd. Ethan noticed the various reactions. Some guests looked embarrassed by her outburst, others seemed entertained, and most of the staff had frozen in place, unsure how to react. "Ma'am, if there's anything I can do to fix," Ethan began, playing his part perfectly. "You can remove yourself from my sight," Vanessa cut him off. "And perhaps ask your supervisor for proper training on how to maneuver in civilized spaces." She turned to James with a dramatic sigh. "Really, James, I expected better from Viridian. If I'm going to represent this brand, I need assurances about the quality of all aspects of the experience." James, looking deeply uncomfortable, nodded. "Of course, Ms. Cruz. Ed, perhaps you could finish up later?" Ethan noticed Sarah Kim, the event manager, watching from nearby. Her face showed obvious discomfort, but she remained silent. Only Lucia, passing with empty glasses, dared to murmur, "It was barely a touch. The dress is fine." "What was that?" Vanessa's head snapped toward Lucia. "Nothing, ma'am," Lucia replied, eyes downcast. "That's what I thought." Vanessa smiled triumphantly, then addressed the small crowd. "You know, my father always said you can tell a person's character by how they treat service staff. I say you can tell a hotel's standards by the staff they keep." The irony of her statement was not lost on Ethan. He lowered his head in feigned shame and pushed his cart away, but not before catching the apologetic glances from a few of the more decent guests. As he retreated to the service corridor, he pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and made several notations about Vanessa's behavior, about James's failure to properly intervene, about which staff members seemed uncomfortable with the situation versus those who appeared indifferent, or even amused. Miguel approached him in the corridor. "Don't take it personally, man. Some of these rich folks, they forget we're human too." "Does that happen often?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "Not usually that bad. Most guests are decent, but there's always a few who think their money buys them the right to treat people like dirt." Miguel shrugged. "Just part of the job. It shouldn't be," Ethan replied, his conviction momentarily breaking through his disguise. Miguel gave him a curious look. "You're right about that. Say, you seem different from our usual temp staff. What's your story anyway?" Ethan smiled easily, slipping back into character. "Just trying to make an honest living. Nothing special about me." If only they knew the truth, that the man they just humiliated was worth billions, owned the very ground they stood on, and was now making careful notes about everyone involved in the incident. Vanessa Cruz had unknowingly just insulted the one person who held her dream job in his hands. As Ethan returned to his duties, he couldn't help but wonder, if Vanessa treated people this way when she was still trying to make an impression, what kind of toxic influence would she be if given actual power within his company? He had 3 more days of his undercover stint to find out. And Ethan Blake was nothing if not thorough in his evaluations. In the executive wing of the Viridian Grand, a meeting was underway that Vanessa Cruz would have given anything to witness. "We've narrowed the PR director search to 3 candidates," announced Diane Mercer, head of human resources, as she distributed folders to the management team. "Vanessa Cruz is our frontrunner. 15 years of luxury brand experience, doubled social engagement for the Ritz Paris, and managed crisis response for Belmont Hotels during that celebrity scandal last year." James Parker, still flushed from his interactions with Vanessa at the gala, nodded enthusiastically. "I've had several conversations with her during her stay. She's incredibly sharp, well-connected, and understands our market positioning perfectly." What they didn't know was that a hidden camera in the conference room was feeding directly to Ethan's tablet as he took his lunch break in the staff room, still dressed in his janitor's uniform. "Her recommendations for our Asian expansion are particularly innovative," James continued, clearly smitten. "And she has existing relationships with several influencers we've been trying to court." Diane looked less convinced. "On paper, she's exceptional. But the final decision remains with Mr. Blake, as always." The executives exchanged knowing glances. Ethan Blake's involvement in hiring was legendary within the company, mysterious yet decisive. New hires only discovered after joining that they had been secretly evaluated by the enigmatic billionaire himself. Meanwhile, across the hotel, Vanessa was working her charm on another potential ally. She'd cornered Marcus Chin, the hotel's marketing director, at the poolside bar. "Marcus, your rebranding of the London property was inspired," she cooed, touching his arm lightly. "The way you balanced modern luxury with historical elements? Pure genius." Marcus beamed at the flattery. "We increased bookings by 30% that quarter. I can see why. You clearly understand what today's luxury clients want." Vanessa sipped her martini, leaning closer. "If I join the team, I hope we'll work closely together. The PR director position is quite influential," Marcus confirmed. "You'd have direct input on our global image strategy." Vanessa's eyes gleamed. "And report directly to the executive board, I understand? Including the mysterious Mr. Blake?" Marcus laughed. "Well, Ethan rarely attends routine meetings. He's more behind the scenes. But yes, technically, the position reports to him. I've heard he's quite the recluse." Vanessa probed. "Does anyone actually see him?" "He has his methods," Marcus said diplomatically. "But don't worry, impress James and the hiring committee, and you're golden." Ethan, who had been collecting towels nearby, suppressed a smile at the irony. Later that afternoon, Ethan was cleaning the executive offices when James and Diane entered, continuing their earlier conversation. "Her resume is extraordinary," Diane admitted. "Harvard Business School, summer internships at top firms, meteoric rise through the PR ranks." James nodded eagerly. "And did you see how she handled herself at the gala? Such poise, such confidence." Ethan's hand tightened on his duster. Poise and confidence were not the words he would use to describe Vanessa's behavior. "I've sent her file to Mr. Blake's office," Diane said. "The final interviews are scheduled for Friday in the Peninsula Suite. Will you be attending?" "Wouldn't miss it," James replied. "I think she's exactly what Viridian needs." After they left, Ethan pulled out his notebook. His dilemma was growing. Vanessa Cruz was undeniably qualified on paper. Her strategies were sound, her experience impeccable. But her character was deeply troubling. Could someone who treated service staff with such contempt represent a company whose founding principle was luxury with humanity? That evening, as Ethan changed back into his street clothes in the maintenance locker room, he overheard Miguel talking to another janitor. "That lady in the blue dress? She cornered me today about the incident last night. Wanted to know if Ed would be working the executive floors this week." "What did you tell her?" the other janitor asked. "That it wasn't her business. She didn't like that much." Miguel chuckled. "Said something about standards and reporting me to management." Ethan emerged from behind the lockers. "She asked about me specifically?" Miguel nodded. "Seems you made quite an impression. I'd steer clear if I were you." As Ethan left through the service entrance, he spotted Vanessa in the lobby, laughing with James Parker. Her hand rested on his arm, her body language intimate despite the public setting. Ethan made his decision. He would arrange one final test before the interview on Friday. Character revealed itself in unguarded moments, and he needed to see Vanessa when she thought no one important was watching. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Sarah, I need to make some arrangements for Friday's interviews. And I'll need the Peninsula Suite prepared for a special guest, someone who'll help me evaluate our final candidates." As he hung up, Ethan watched Vanessa charm James with a practiced smile. She had no idea that in 3 days she would be sitting across from the man she had humiliated, the man who held her dream job in his hands. The irony almost made him smile. Ethan sat in his penthouse office, dressed impeccably in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, a stark contrast to the janitor's uniform he'd worn hours earlier. Spread before him were the resumes of the 3 finalists for the PR director position, with Vanessa Cruz's file prominently displayed on top. Her credentials were undeniably impressive. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Ethan called, quickly closing Vanessa's file. James Parker entered, looking surprised to find Ethan actually present. Their interactions were typically limited to video calls and emails. "Mr. Blake, I didn't expect to find you here in person," James said, extending his hand nervously. Ethan smiled, standing to shake James's hand. "I like to be hands-on with key decisions. This PR director role is crucial for our Asian expansion." James nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. That's actually why I wanted to speak with you directly." He placed a folder on Ethan's desk. "My formal recommendation for Vanessa Cruz. She's exceptional, Harvard MBA, stellar track record with luxury brands, and impeccable social connections. I've reviewed her resume," Ethan said neutrally. "Quite impressive. Beyond her qualifications, she exudes exactly the image we want for Viridian." James continued enthusiastically. "Sophisticated, confident, commanding. She knows how to work a room." "And how does she interact with staff?" Ethan asked casually, watching James's reaction closely. "Oh, completely professional," James replied without hesitation. "She understands luxury service from top to bottom." Ethan noted the way James avoided direct eye contact. Either he was lying or simply hadn't noticed Vanessa's behavior toward lower-level employees. Neither possibility impressed him. "I understand you've spent considerable time with her during her stay," Ethan observed, keeping his tone conversational. James flushed slightly. "Only in a professional capacity, of course. Getting to know our candidates is part of the evaluation process." "Of course," Ethan agreed, though he'd seen the lingering touches and intimate conversations. "The final interviews are tomorrow in the Peninsula Suite. I'll be conducting them personally." James couldn't hide his surprise. "You'll be there? In person? Is that a problem?" Ethan asked mildly. "No, not at all." James backpedaled quickly. "It's just unusual. We typically present the candidates' packages to you after the committee interviews. I'm making an exception for this position." Ethan tapped Vanessa's file. "Ms. Cruz has certainly made an impression." After James left, Ethan called in Sarah Kim, the event manager who had witnessed Vanessa's outburst at the gala. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Blake?" Sarah asked, entering cautiously. "Sarah, you've been with us for 5 years now. I value your perspective." Ethan gestured for her to sit. "You were present during an incident at the gala involving a janitor named Ed and one of our PR candidates." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "You heard about that? I make it my business to know what happens in my hotels," Ethan replied smoothly. "What was your impression?" Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Ms. Cruz was harsh. The contact was minimal, but she made quite a scene. Honestly, it was embarrassing. Why didn't you intervene?" "I should have," Sarah admitted. "But she was with Mr. Parker and several board members. I was afraid speaking up might jeopardize my position." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "And if she becomes PR director?" "She'd be my superior in certain situations," Sarah said carefully. "If that's how she treats staff when she's still trying to impress us." "Thank you for your honesty," Ethan said, making a note. "One more thing, I've arranged a special scenario for tomorrow morning in the main lobby. You'll receive detailed instructions, but it involves our candidates and an elderly guest needing assistance." After Sarah left, Ethan reviewed the file of the other finalist, Elena Diaz. Her resume was equally impressive, though she had focused more on ethical luxury branding. Her references emphasized her collaborative leadership style. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his chief of security. "Surveillance confirms Cruz spent 2 hours in Parker's suite last night. Dinner ordered from room service." The boundary between professional networking and something more inappropriate had clearly been crossed. Ethan sighed, his dilemma deepening. Vanessa's qualifications were perfect, her strategies brilliant. But her character seemed fundamentally at odds with Viridian's values. That evening, disguised once more as Ed the janitor, Ethan cleaned the corridor outside the hotel bar where Vanessa was holding court with several executives. Her laughter carried down the hallway, charming and calculated. "Can you believe they still have that old man working at the front desk?" she was saying. "This morning, he took forever processing my room charge. Not exactly the image of efficiency Viridian should project." Ethan recognized her target, Harold Myers, a beloved 30-year employee who had personally trained most of the front desk staff. His methodical approach was legendary, as was his perfect accuracy record. Making a final note in his book, Ethan decided his test tomorrow would be definitive. He would give Vanessa one last chance to demonstrate that perhaps he had misjudged her. As he walked away, he heard her mention his name. "So tomorrow I finally meet the mysterious Ethan Blake," she said, her voice carrying a hint of victory. "James assures me it's merely a formality at this point." Ethan smiled to himself. Vanessa Cruz was in for quite a surprise. Morning light streamed through the grand windows of the Viridian's lobby as Ethan, once again disguised as Ed the janitor, meticulously polished the marble floor near the main entrance. From this strategic position, he could observe everything without drawing attention. Sarah Kim approached, clipboard in hand, and gave him a subtle nod, the signal that everything was in place. Neither of them acknowledged that she now knew her boss was the man in the janitor's uniform. The fewer people who knew about his undercover operation, the better. "The candidates will be coming through separately on their way to breakfast meetings," Sarah murmured as she pretended to inspect his work. "Ms. Cruz is scheduled for 8:15, Ms. Diaz for 8:30. Ethan nodded slightly. "And our guest? Mr. Abernathy is ready. He's quite enjoying his role." Sarah smiled briefly before walking away. At precisely 8:13, Vanessa Cruz emerged from the elevator, looking immaculate in a tailored cream suit. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She moved with the confidence of someone who already believed the job was hers, scrolling through her phone as she walked. Ethan watched her approach, then gave a subtle hand signal. On cue, an elderly man with a cane and two heavy-looking suitcases emerged from a side corridor. Walter Abernathy, Ethan's former mentor and now a Viridian board member, was playing the role of a struggling hotel guest to perfection. Walter positioned himself directly in Vanessa's path, deliberately fumbling with his luggage. One suitcase tipped over, creating a minor obstacle. "Oh dear," Walter said loudly, his voice carrying the slight quaver of age. "Excuse me, miss? Might you lend me a hand? These bags are rather heavy for these old bones." Vanessa looked up from her phone, first annoyed at the interruption, then calculating as she assessed the elderly man. Her eyes flicked to his modest clothing, his worn suitcases, and most tellingly, to see if anyone important was watching. Without a word, she stepped around both Walter and his luggage, giving the fallen suitcase a wide berth to avoid scuffing her designer heels. "Miss?" Walter called after her. "Please, could you help an old man for just a moment?" Vanessa paused, visibly irritated at the persistence. She half-turned and spoke loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'm sorry, but I'm late for an important meeting." Her smile was tight, her eyes cold. "That's what staff are for. There's a janitor right there who can help you." She gestured dismissively toward Ethan, then added under her breath but still audible. "That's literally what they pay them for." With that, she continued toward the restaurant, never looking back to see Walter's knowing smile or the subtle nod Ethan gave him. 15 minutes later, Elena Diaz entered the lobby. Unlike Vanessa, she wasn't focused on her phone but instead taking in her surroundings, smiling warmly at the front desk staff as she passed. Walter repeated his performance, struggling with the same suitcases in Elena's path. "Oh goodness," Elena said immediately, rushing forward. "Let me help you with those." "You're very kind," Walter said. "But I don't want to trouble you, young lady." "It's no trouble at all," Elena insisted, already picking up the fallen suitcase. "Are you checking in or checking out?" "Checking out," Walter replied. "My taxi is waiting, but these old legs aren't what they used to be." "Then let's get you outside," Elena said cheerfully. She turned to Ethan, who was nearby with his cleaning cart. "Excuse me, would you mind watching his other bag while I help this gentleman to his car? I'll come right back for it." "Happy to," Ethan replied with a smile, noting how she had asked for his help rather than demanded it. As Elena escorted Walter outside, Ethan contacted the security office through his concealed earpiece. "Did you get all that on camera?" "Every second, Mr. Blake," came the response. Both interactions, multiple angles. Good. Have it ready for the 10 a.m. meeting. When Elena returned for the second bag, she thanked Ethan sincerely. I appreciate your help. I'm Elena, by the way. Ed, he replied, shaking her offered hand. Good luck with your interview today. Her eyes widened slightly. How did you know about that? Ethan smiled. Staff hears things. The PR director position, right? You seem like you'd be good at it. Elena laughed. Thank you, Ed. That means a lot. As she walked away with Walter's second bag, Ethan made his final notes. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Vanessa saw the world divided into those who could help her climb and those beneath her notice. Elena saw people as people, regardless of their station. In the service elevator on his way back to his penthouse suite to change for the interviews, Ethan reviewed the surveillance footage on his tablet. The side-by-side comparison was striking. His decision was made. Now he just needed to deliver it. An hour later, dressed in an impeccable suit that cost more than most people's cars, Ethan Blake, billionaire, not janitor, stepped into the conference room where the final interviews would be held. He placed a USB drive containing the morning's footage on the table and waited for the candidates to arrive. The stage was set for a revelation that Vanessa Cruz would never forget. The Peninsula Suite had been transformed into an impressive boardroom for the final interviews. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, while a massive mahogany table dominated the center of the room. Executive board members filed in, taking their seats in anticipation. James Parker fidgeted nervously. Has anyone actually seen Mr. Blake this morning? I'm sure he'll be here. Diane from HR replied. He specifically requested to conduct these interviews himself. The door opened, and Walter Abernathy entered, now impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit, not the struggling elderly tourist from earlier. Walter! I didn't know you'd be joining us, James exclaimed, standing to greet the board member. Walter smiled enigmatically. Wouldn't miss it for the world. At precisely 10 a.m., Elena Diaz was escorted in for her interview. She handled the questions with grace and insight, presenting a comprehensive vision for Viridian's public image that emphasized authentic luxury and ethical branding. When she left, the board members exchanged impressed glances. She's unexpectedly good, James admitted reluctantly. Indeed, Walter agreed with a knowing smile. But let's see your star candidate before we make comparisons. At 11 a.m., Vanessa Cruz strode confidently into the suite, her smile dazzling as she greeted each board member by name. She seemed untroubled by the empty chair at the head of the table. I'm so honored to be here, she began, arranging her portfolio on the table. I've prepared a comprehensive proposal for Viridian's global positioning strategy. Very impressive, James said warmly. But perhaps we should wait for... The door opened, cutting him off mid-sentence. Vanessa turned, her practiced smile ready to charm the final member of the interview panel. The smile froze on her face. Standing in the doorway was a man in an exquisitely tailored suit, a man whose face she recognized instantly despite the expensive clothes that had replaced the janitor's uniform. You, she whispered, her complexion paling rapidly. Ms. Cruz, Ethan Blake said pleasantly, walking to the head of the table. I believe we've met, though we weren't formally introduced. Ethan Blake, co-founder and majority shareholder of Viridian Group. A stunned silence fell over the room. James Parker's mouth hung open in shock, while several board members exchanged knowing glances. I don't understand, Vanessa stammered, her composure cracking. You were cleaning floors. I was, Ethan confirmed, taking his seat. I periodically work undercover in various positions throughout my properties. It provides invaluable insight into how our hotels actually function. He smiled slightly. And how our potential executives behave when they think no one important is watching. The blood drained from Vanessa's face as understanding dawned. Mr. Blake, if this is about that minor incident at the gala, I can explain. Actually, Ethan interrupted, connecting his laptop to the room's display system. Let's allow the footage to speak for itself. The large screen came to life, showing crystal clear security footage of Vanessa's tirade at the gala, her contemptuous words echoing through the boardroom's excellent sound system. "That's what janitors and staff are for," her recorded voice declared haughtily. The footage then cut to that morning's test with Walter, showing her dismissive behavior contrasted sharply with Elena's kindness. The comparison was devastating. When the video ended, the room remained silent. Vanessa's hands trembled as she attempted to gather her composure. That's not, you've taken these incidents out of context," she protested weakly. "Have I?" Ethan asked mildly. "Please enlighten us on the proper context for humiliating staff members and ignoring guests in need." Vanessa looked desperately around the table for allies, but found none. Even James was avoiding eye contact, suddenly fascinated by his notepad. "The Viridian Group was founded on a principle I hold sacred," Ethan continued, his voice calm but firm. "Luxury with humanity. We believe that true luxury isn't about exclusion or looking down on others, it's about elevating everyone's experience, staff and guests alike." He closed his laptop decisively. "Your qualifications are impressive, Ms. Cruz. Your strategies are sound. But Viridian isn't just looking for technical expertise, we're looking for leaders who embody our values." Vanessa tried one last desperate play. "I can change. I can be whatever Viridian needs me to be." "That's precisely the problem," Ethan replied. "Character isn't something you put on like a designer suit. It's revealed when you think no one who matters is watching." He stood up, signaling the end of the interview. "Thank you for your interest in the position, but we'll be moving forward with another candidate." Vanessa sat frozen, unable to process the spectacular collapse of her carefully constructed plans. "James will show you out," Ethan added, nodding to the visibly uncomfortable VP. As Vanessa gathered her materials with shaking hands, Walter Abernathy spoke up. "You know, my dear, you might have gotten the job if you'd simply helped an old man with his bags." The irony of it all finally hit her. Her dream job, lost not because of her resume or her strategies or her connections, but because of how she had treated people she deemed unimportant. As the door closed behind her, the board erupted in murmurs. Ethan held up his hand for silence. "I believe we've found our new PR director," he said. "Unless anyone objects to Elena Diaz?" No one did. 3 months later, Ethan Blake stood at the back of the grand ballroom, watching Elena Diaz work the room at the Viridian Grand's charity gala. Now officially the PR director, she moved seamlessly between guests, her natural warmth and professionalism drawing people to her. "She was the right choice," Walter Abernathy said, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Ethan. "The brand metrics are up 20% since she took over." "It's not just the numbers," Ethan replied, taking the glass. "Have you seen the employee satisfaction surveys? Up 35% in the communications department." Walter nodded approvingly. "Nothing like removing a toxic influence before it can spread." Ethan took a sip of champagne, thinking back to Vanessa Cruz's dramatic exit from the Peninsula suite. The story might have ended there, a private humiliation, a lesson learned, but Vanessa had ensured otherwise. Within hours of her rejection, she had launched a blistering social media tirade against Viridian hotels, claiming discrimination and unfair hiring practices. She had clearly expected the company to offer her a settlement to make the problem disappear. She had miscalculated badly. "I heard she's still struggling to find work in the industry," Walter commented, following Ethan's gaze to where Elena was now chatting with the mayor. "Word travels fast in luxury hospitality. She did it to herself," Ethan said without remorse. "After she went public with her accusations, we had no choice but to release the security footage in response." The video of Vanessa berating Ed the janitor and ignoring an elderly guest had gone viral overnight, becoming a case study in how not to behave in professional settings. Far from damaging Viridian's reputation, the incident had enhanced it, a company that valued character over credentials, that wouldn't be bullied into hiring someone toxic just because they looked good on paper. Across the room, Miguel, now promoted to facilities manager, directed his team with quiet efficiency. Lucia had moved up to events coordinator, working directly with Elena on special functions. Both had been recognized for their integrity during Ethan's undercover evaluation. "Are you planning another undercover stint soon?" Walter asked with amusement. "Perhaps as a valet parker or room service waiter?" Ethan smiled. "I think I'll give it a few months. The janitor who was really the boss story has become something of a legend among the staff." Indeed, while the public story had focused on Vanessa's dramatic downfall, within Viridian's walls, a different narrative had taken hold. Employees whispered about the billionaire who mopped floors to understand their challenges, who noticed when they showed kindness or courage, who valued character above all else. The effect on company culture had been profound. Customer satisfaction scores had risen across all properties as staff began treating every guest with genuine care, not out of fear that they might be secretly important, but because it was now clearly a core value of the organization. "Mr. Blake," Elena said, approaching with a warm smile. "The donation announcements are ready whenever you are." "Thanks, Elena. And please, it's Ethan." He set down his glass. "How's the new initiative coming along? The staff advancement program?" "It's been phenomenal." Her eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "We've already had 50 employees apply for educational assistance. Miguel is taking business management courses, and Lucia's enrolled in event planning certification." Ethan nodded approvingly. The program had been Elena's idea, using a portion of the company's profits to help service staff advance their careers, whether within Viridian or beyond. As he followed Elena to the podium, Ethan caught sight of a familiar face near the service entrance: Harold, the elderly front desk clerk whom Vanessa had criticized. He was training a new employee, patiently explaining the check-in system with the same methodical approach that had irritated Vanessa but had kept his error rate at 0 for 30 years. Ethan made a mental note to stop by and chat with Harold later. The old-timer's institutional knowledge was invaluable, something Vanessa had been too short-sighted to appreciate. At the podium, Ethan gazed out at the gathered guests and staff. In the back, hotel employees who would normally be invisible at such an event stood alongside wealthy patrons, a deliberate change Elena had implemented to recognize that luxury experiences were created by people at all levels. "Welcome to the first annual Viridian Community Foundation Gala," Ethan began. "Tonight, we celebrate not just luxury, but humanity, the belief that how we treat each other matters more than any material success." As applause filled the room, Ethan reflected on how a simple janitor's uniform had revealed what expensive suits often concealed: the true character of people when they thought no one important was watching. The lesson had spread throughout his organization like ripples in a pond. From housekeepers to executives, people now understood that at Viridian, everyone was seen, everyone was valued, and character would always matter more than credentials. It was a legacy far more meaningful than any building or brand he could have created. And somewhere out there, Ethan hoped, perhaps Vanessa Cruz had learned something valuable as well, though he suspected that lesson had come too late for her career in luxury hospitality. True luxury, after all, had never been about money or power or status. It had always been about humanity.